Welcome to the Speak Like a Leader podcast with John Bates. Welcome to the show. With me today is someone who really has made an enormous difference for me. And she's somebody who, it's kind of funny. She came into my life along with the pandemic, but she was much more pleasant than the pandemic. And so her name is Amy Nubson, and she has been an award-winning designer and marketer for over 20 years. And she's been an entrepreneur in business for herself for 15 years. And for that entire time, she's been working with her husband, Avery, at Nufire Marketing. And now, I think maybe slightly out of how we bumped into each other during the pandemic, she is now the founder of Rebrand You, where she coaches people in business and in life as a fulfillment coach. And Amy, welcome to the show. I'm really happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here today.
Cool. Well, you're somebody that I was very excited to talk with here, because you've got such a powerful story, and I kind of watched you get in touch with that story and the difference that it made for you to get in touch with that story. Would you be willing to just tell us your story?
Of course, I can totally tell you my story. That's what we're here for, right?
I think it's what we're on earth for, really, is to share our stories.
Exactly. Well, of course I will. Okay. I was sitting in my office as the snow started to fall. As I looked out in my gardens that were full of weeds, and the grass that was unmowed, and the leaves were still on the ground, and it is December. But the snow is going to cover it all up. And I just couldn't do one more thing. I didn't want people to see the mess that my life had become. And uncertainty, doubt, and fear had become unwelcome visitors. And today I got another call from an angry client demanding a refund that I didn't have. I couldn't give because there was nothing left to give. I felt powerless to do anything, and I don't know how to fix this. Have you ever been so ashamed that you try to hide it from everyone? Were you so embarrassed about your gardens or your life that you wanted to hide? I did. But I realized my life wasn't always like this. I was a happy, energetic kid from a small dairy farm in Wisconsin, where I started working at a young age. And I remember a day when my dad told me to go into the shed and get him a hammer. And I was like, yeah, I got this. I can get a hammer. So I come out, hand him that hammer. I'm like, here you go, Dad. And he's like, I don't want a hammer. I want a wrench. And I'm like, what? All right. Go back into the shed and I'm like, get him the wrench. But what I realized is my dad had been he came over to Norway when he was a little kid. And English wasn't always the easiest language for him. So his words would get screwed up. And my 8-year-old self interpreted that as, I need to anticipate what he needs. So the next time he asked for that hammer, I'm like, I got this. I got the solution. Ran into the shed and I grabbed every single tool that I could possibly carry and go, which one do you want? And then, of course, I had to put them all back, but I got the right tool. And now that I look at it, my life where I am right now, sitting in that office, I realized I had created my entire life around that idea, around anticipating other people's needs and expectations. And what do I want to do about it?
And that story really opened some things up for you, right?
It did. It made me realize there was a path to where I'd gotten.
Yeah.
And it started with such a simple story. And that story weaved its way through my entire life to get me to the point where I had actually paid more attention to other people's needs than my own.
Yeah.
And that was eye-opening, and it made me reevaluate everything I was doing in that moment. And I needed to change, and I needed to put myself first.
Yeah. And that was a really big realization. I want to talk a little bit about what happened out of that realization, but I also want to go back and ask you how easy that was,
Months and months of work. It's the discovery process, trying to figure out the thread back to that story. Like, why were you here and what happened? It also is the words and the stories, and then not over explaining all the details and getting to what's actually really important.
Yeah.
So you go through so many like variations, and then you cut and you cut and you cut, and they change. You cut more.
Yeah. And that's what we did. Right. And I remember you looking back on this, and I just remember how so first of all, you didn't give up. Second of all, you just kept uncovering more and more and more, and it started to make deeper sense to you, I think.
Yeah.
What was going on, right?
Well, and my first version, it all has to do with the whole point of the story starts in my husband's accident and everything falling apart. And the first version was all about him. And I was like, dang it, I did it again. Like, it's all about him, not about me.
Right.
I had to rewrite the whole speech and the story to be about me. And so it was to have that feedback from other people, to have that support when writing something like this. I got out of my own way and writing it because I was stuck in my habits.
Yeah. And I think that, from over here, it was a real breakthrough for you to kind of get yourself on a new level and start to ask for what you needed and do what you needed. And I think it maybe made the people around you a little uncomfortable because it was different and it wasn't how it had usually been. And
yes, it was one of those things where I signed up for your class and I was like, I don't even know why I'm signing up for this. Like I know
that
I
happens,
needed to. Yeah, I know I needed to do it. I don't know why, but I'm going to do it. And I have a terrible fear of public speaking at the time. And still I'm getting over that, but it's taking some time.
Well, here you are, you're on a podcast, and I know I'm not the first podcast you've been on, like not even this week, probably.
Yeah. It's amazing when you get that story, that confidence grows, right?
Yeah.
So it's clarity and confidence. That's part of my brand now, of who I am. And it's the ability to now say yes when I am a little scared of something, and knowing that I have these tools. That's what I think of these stories as, tools.
Yeah.
In my back pocket that I could always bring with me.
Yeah. Yeah. And they don't weigh very much.
Yes, exactly. And they're always there. And I can always depend on them to make an impact when I don't maybe not feel fully in myself, or I'm a little out of my comfort zone, or the opportunity shows up. I'm ready.
And you, I think if it's fair to say, tell me, the process of you uncovering this story and then stepping into sharing it and then letting what you realized impact your life, like that's kind of where Rebrand You came from, right? You now take people through the process that you went through for yourself, right? And I think it's there's three main pieces. Do you want to tell us about those?
Yeah. In this process, Rebrand You started in my, like, it would not leave me alone. Like, I needed to develop this course, just like I needed to recreate myself.
That Elizabeth Gilbert kind of way.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it was part of me and it was not going away. And so I started developing it, and I realized out of the speeches I had created 3 C's that I call now is clarity, courage, and confidence. So it's a clarity to understand who I am, what I'm going through, where did I get here? Is that whole intro is part of that origin story, is that clarity piece. And then the courage to take action, like to now do something about it. Now that I have a story, I have a voice. What am I going to do? And how can I be courageous in doing so? And it's not about the courageous of like jumping on the stage and doing that. It's the small steps, I believe, and little things matter in our daily life.
Yeah.
And then it's the clarity or the courage or the confidence. So clarity, courage, and confidence, right?
There you go.
Confidence. And that's something I always lacked. And that's why I hid for so many years. That's why I loved marketing, because I got to like be confident behind somebody else's brand, somebody else's idea. And here I'm like, nope, this is me. I'm showing up here fully.
Yeah.
And that confidence took time to develop. And now opportunities just walk in the door.
Yeah.
And I don't even have to try anymore. And I'm like, this is so much fun. And I love just showing up as me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and there's a lot to that. I think for leaders, I think for entrepreneurs, I think for anybody in life, getting that clarity for yourself first. That's always the most important step. And looking back and seeing that there is this coherence to your life, to one's life, right? And then, having the courage and the confidence to go do something about it. And to, I think that what I've come to believe is everybody really, like everyone's doing the thing that inspires them. It's just some people are more clear about that than others. And when people get clear that, this is what inspires me. Look, if it's not what inspires them, then they go do something else, right? But if it is what inspires them and they get clear that this is what inspires them, it just makes such a big difference. And it doesn't matter whether it's a one-person entrepreneurial business or a leader who's leading thousands and thousands of people. That clarity is just such a key.
And it's one of those things that when I was doing the speech and I was doing your process, I had to do that myself. Like that's something I was like, how do I figure out these stories? Where are they coming from? And that's when I realized, and I've heard it from so many other participants as we co-lead and speak like a leader experience now, that people are like, I don't know what my origin story is. I don't know what the stories are and what their pieces are. And I'm like, that's what Rebrand You does, is it looks at all of it and starts to see what are the biggest impacts that your story has created to get you there. It's that thread to your life now that's important, the good and the bad. They're both equally important because they've shaped who we are.
Well, I love that saying that your superpower is always located right next to your scar.
Yeah, that mine definitely was.
There you go. That's a pretty dependable one.
Yeah.
So Amy, looking back, who are some of the leaders that influence you? What are some of the sayings, some of the stories, some of the leaders that influenced you in your life?
I think it's the everyday person, learning about how people devalue their story. They devalue their ability to have importance, and just listening to people in general. I love it. I love people, and I want to know more about them. I find them fascinating.
Yeah. Well,
so every person to me inspires me, good or bad. And I now have gotten to the point, like if somebody comes across bitter, I'm like, I get more curious.
Yeah.
I wonder why. Why are they, there's something painful going on in their lives, and the ability to just see people for who they are. Yeah. That inspires me every day.
Well, you point to something that I think is important for human beings in general to remember, which is that, just like you said, we are just tremendously deeply interested in other human beings. It's just how we are. We evolved in groups and we're interested in each other. And so I think I know you're telling the truth when you say you're just interested in people. And someone listening who thinks, oh, no one would be interested in my stories, they could take comfort in the fact that that was your genuine answer. And, it's how people are. We're just interested in each other.
Yeah, because It doesn't matter if you're a CEO or if you're, working on a line.
Mm-hmm.
We all equally have an important place to interact with people, and that story matters. And I love it when somebody realizes in that moment, when they realize they have something to say.
Yeah. I mean,
That's a most beautiful moment ever to watch and witness and see people just light up and their body language change. And then they're just the smile that comes on their face when it just clicks.
yeah. I mean, well, that's why we love leading the Speak Like a Leader boot camp, because that just happens for everybody at a certain point in the 10 weeks. People light up, and it's just like, whoa. And that's the other thing that I think it's a really good experiential thing that course offers, is people get to actually see and experience for real that other people whom they trust, whom they've gotten to know, find their story interesting, and they're not just saying it, And I think that's something that is really good no matter where, right? It doesn't have to be the Speak Like a Leader bootcamp experience. It could be, but to just start sharing one's stories and start noticing when they land and what lands and what people are interested in about what you have to share. Because any human being who's made it even close to adulthood has been through some stuff.
Oh, yes, they have.
And that's really interesting to other human beings. What have you been through, and what did you learn? And, and it's one of those things. I mean, it's what I like about your story and you sharing what you're sharing now, is that when you have to go through something really, really, really hard to learn a lesson, that means it's a valuable, difficult to learn lesson. And if you share it with me, I can learn it just by listening, and I don't have to do that. I don't have to go through that thing you went through to get the lesson.
Exactly. And it's also the process of how you tell the story, right? It's that vulnerability, that insightful vulnerability. And it's also sharing a story as a survivor. That's the key, I think, instead of a victim. Because I remember when I was a kid, my sister and I would both tell the stories of what happened in our day. And, I remember coming back in college and we were telling my dad, and my dad's like, Amy, stop complaining. I'm like, what? And I'm like, did you just listen to my sister? Like, she complained the whole time, but she did it in such an entertaining way. And she did it in such a charismatic way that you didn't even realize she was complaining. And I'm like, there's something to this. The delivery does matter.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I didn't catch on to that delivery. I kind of slowly figured it out, but it wasn't until I took your course, John, that I really figured out the delivery matters and the insightful vulnerability part of it.
Yeah.
And what we learned out of the situation. And that is the key to the storytelling part.
Mm.
And so we don't sound like we're complaining, we're sharing instead.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the same story, right? It just comes in a different way and lands in a very different way, depending on how you tell it, how you structure it, what the focus is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All of that matters so much.
I didn't get how much that mattered till I started really doing this, what I do now, a little more than a decade ago. But it's a really, really important point. The structure and the way that you share the story. I mean, it can take what would be otherwise a very mediocre story and make it fabulous, or take a really fabulous story and make it mediocre. It's all about that structure and crafting.
Yeah. And then making sure you have the clarity to go with it, because you can't do the story if you don't have the clarity.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what took me a while. I think when I developed this story was, what is my clarity? Who am I? Like, I had to figure all that out. I had been already doing that for years, but I had to really verbalize it.
Well, one of the things that I say a lot, Amy, given what I do, obviously, and I'd love to get your take on this, so I'm going to say it. Over the last decade plus of doing a whole bunch of this work in the TED format, I've coached, probably, 30, I've coached speakers at spoken at or been the official pitch coach at probably almost 40 TEDx events. And then I've worked with thousands of people in the private sector on their TED-like talks. So it's something I've been focused on. And here's what I think, and I'd love your thoughts about it. I feel like really creating an extremely well-chosen, well-crafted, well-delivered TED-like talk is just one of the best leadership exercises that anybody could ever go through.
Yeah, it really is, because one, it makes you discover who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Two, it allows you to get your language developed.
Yeah.
And then three, it allows you to connect to the person you're talking to so quickly and so intimately that I've told my story and I'm like, they're like, I feel like I've known you for years.
Yeah. It's amazing, right? I mean, and it's authentic.
It's
the only
authentic.
reason that happens is because that's really your story and you told it so well and so openly that people can just step right in there.
Yep. And as a leader, who doesn't want to lead somebody they respect, they value, and who gets them?
Yeah.
So I believe truly it's a leadership quality, and it doesn't matter if you're leading your children or if you're leading a team. It's so important to understand this power of creating and crafting these stories, because what other thing goes into all aspects of our lives?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But this.
Yeah. It's a really good point. It's a very holistic experience that brings I think a new depth to how people lead.
Yes. And I don't follow people blindly. I gotten burned. I mean, how many of us have been burned by the person we just like blindly followed because they seemed like they had it all put together. And it's the same thing with social media together. Like, we want to know the real person.
Right.
Who are they? What are they doing? Like, what are they, I was telling somebody my story the other day in a coffee shop, and she just about like her mouth dropped open and she goes, your story's just like mine.
Yeah. There you go.
Except for I did lose my husband. I did lose my business. I did file bankruptcy.
Ooh.
And she's like, I can't believe how close our stories are. And then she tells me a story herself, and she's like, I've only shared that with 2 other people. And mind you, this is the first time I've met her in person, and I've known her a little bit online for 2 years.
Yeah.
That's how quickly you can develop a relationship. And we're like, okay, what can we do together? Like, we were already planning like collaboration instead of that whole let's get to know you for a while relationship.
Yeah, it's certainly it's a catalyst to human relationships, to especially to have your origin story well understood, well chosen, well crafted, well told. It just, and the other thing that I hear in what you said is it magnetizes the right people, and it kind of filters the wrong people, right? If they don't respond to your story, then they're probably not the right person for you anyway.
Right. And being a person of marketing, I heard it every time, like, well, who's your ideal client? They're like, everybody. I'm like, like that's the worst answer you can give. And I get it, because I was a people pleaser most of my life. So I totally get that answer, right? Even though I knew it wasn't right or appropriate. And the more you start to realize who you are, that clarity and that courage to take action of and show up as you, if people don't get you, that's okay. But it's more about the courage of saying it, telling that story, being vulnerable. And it's really about attracting the right people that be part of your tribe.
So let's talk for a minute about the fact that you were nervous about speaking, right? So I mean, and I remember it, I think that there was an element of you were nervous just about being seen, right? And
I was.
And I tell people, and I think it's really important to remember, no matter where you are on the spectrum of this, public speaking is dangerous. There's a reason that we're scared. It's not about fearlessness, right? It's about courage. Fearless gets you killed. Fearless is just stupid. But this is much more about courage, having your fear and then doing it anyway. I mean, and look what happened to Jesus and Joan of Arc and Martin Luther King and John F. Kennedy and Socrates. I mean, they got noticed by the group and right. So
yeah, exactly. It's a very scary thing to do. And I mean, the whole time, the very first time I was taking your class, I was dreading that last day where I had to give my speech. I was like, oh my goodness, this is coming up. And I was terrified of it because I was so used to hiding. I was so used to telling other people's stories, not my own.
Right.
And this was the first opportunity in a group of like relative strangers. What was I going to share and how? And how was I going to be vulnerable in front of them? And I cried. I cried all the way through that first speech and the recording. And I couldn't even hold it together. Like, but I did it. You know?
You did it. And I think that everybody on that call was really impressed. They were very inspired. Like, fearless is not inspiring, you know, it's that someone demonstrating courage like you demonstrated. And I wonder, how would you characterize the things that, like, how would you characterize what it took to do that? Like, did the don't be nervous thing, be of service part help? Did the clarity help? Like, what were the things that you think, how would you identify what got you the courage to do that?
Well, part of it is my personal power statement that I create. And I do this in the Rebrand You, is taking your limited beliefs and creating a power statement. And one of my limiting beliefs was I didn't matter. My voice.
Yeah, I remember.
You know,
yes.
Yeah. And believing that for so many years. So every time I'm scared, every time I want to do something like give a speech, it's the idea that I matter and my voice has an impact.
Yes, it does.
That is what gets me to the table. That's what gets me on the recording. That's what gets me motivated. I also have techniques like singing a song that inspires me beforehand, you know, to get me pumped up and get me ready and get me, okay, I can do this. And my voice warmed up, you know, like there's techniques that I can do, but it's the idea. And every time I'm in a place of doubt, it's like, no, I matter. And my voice does too. And it's my job to say it, to say something, help others. Because like I said earlier, I love people and their stories do matter and they have an impact in this world. And if I get to play my little part, I get to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And that is so rewarding and it's bigger than me and it gets me out of my little funk of doubt or like my period of fear, and to the point where earlier, a friend of mine who's writing a play, he's like, Amy, I need to do a run through in this play. We're going to all virtually go online. Will you do a reading of a part? And I was always terrified of reading out loud. I'm like, sure, why not? I can do that. After I get off the call with him, like, why didn't I ask him what the part was? Why didn't I ask him like how long this character, like all these doubts started
Why didn't
coming
I find some way out of this?
Why did I just agree to this? And I get on the call with them and they're all actors. And I'm like, I'm the only non-theater actor on this call. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to have fun with it. You know, they don't expect me to be perfect because they know I'm not a theater major or a person that's been in theater. And I was so grateful when my friend's like, oh, you die in the first act. I'm like, oh, thank goodness.
That's funny.
But it was the idea that I was able to say yes, to get over that fear and go, of course I can help you out. I'm honored that you chose me and you thought I would be a good fit for this part. It wasn't about me. It was about him.
Well, you know, that what I hear, a couple of things in what you just, all of what you just said. One is that you got that you mattered, right? And I think that something that I've realized watching this over and over again is that I think a lot of times unconsciously people will tell themselves they don't matter just to get off the hook, right? Because if I don't matter, then I don't have to show up, right? Then I don't have to take the risk. Then it's not on me. It's somebody else will do it, right? No, that's totally not true. You do matter. And you know, the fact that you matter means you have a responsibility. So number one, you got over that, and you got that you mattered, and you got it in a way that then had you get over yourself, right? Don't be nervous. That's about you. Be of service. And you put your attention on the message and the difference and the opportunity, and that you can make a difference. And that has you show up even when you're scared.
Exactly. And I'm a true believer that when you're ready, the opportunities show up.
Yeah.
And if you're ready, you say yes. And you just don't put an outcome or an expectation to it. Just let it happen. And that's what I did. And once I said yes to that opportunity, 3 more opportunities came after that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, this really does have a big impact, because now I have that confidence. Like, I just did this.
Yeah.
And the next time I said yes, and it was a bigger opportunity and more to share my voice.
Yeah.
And I'm just loving every moment of it.
Well, and you've gone from like not being on podcasts and not doing public speaking to kind of doing a lot of that, right?
Well, I used to have my own podcast, and it's, and I wanted to do it because I wanted to get over my, my insecurity of the sound of my own voice.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can do this, but I was so scared. I was like, I have to have a co-host.
Yeah.
I can't do this alone. And I did it, and I was about travel and entrepreneurship and being, like someone who, I'm blanking on the word, but who travels the world and works around. That's what I do. So nomadic.
Yep.
And I picked, of course, my co-host Mike at the time, Mike Bruce, who's this amazing, charismatic, like man who I knew could support me. But when I was doing the stories, I'm like, oh my gosh, Mike is overriding me because he's so excited, and he just jumps in and does. And I'm like, I would have to force my way into the conversation because he was just over talking me. And I'm like, this isn't working either.
That's why you picked him, because you knew
It's exactly why I picked him. And he was brilliant, and he did a great job, and he allowed me to hide.
Yeah, there you go.
And I was like, after a while, I was like, no, I really do have something to say, and I do need to stand up and do this on my own.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic happened, so we just kind of stopped naturally because everybody stopped traveling. But it was a great opportunity for me to get used to hearing my voice and realize it was a little stepping stone. It was one step closer to the opportunity. I needed that opportunity to just say yes to your program.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm not a big believer of take giant steps. Like, if you're afraid of public speaking, go speak on a big stage. Well, don't do that. Like, do small little things. Opportunities will show up for you to get that confidence to build up to that fear. Nobody wants to jump headfirst into their fear.
Yeah.
And it can have the reverse response.
Yeah.
Like, I'm never doing that again. Oh my God, that's horrible. But yeah, all these opportunities, I look back and I am so grateful for my entire journey, from that moment sitting in my office crying and not wanting to go home to where I am today.
Yeah. Well, and so just to fill in a couple of blanks, like your husband, Avery, got hit in a car accident, was pretty severely injured, but not externally. So it was really hard to handle that. And so you guys had a lot of medical debt, and I think you've recently paid all that off and are like, catch us up to where you are now.
Yeah. So his accident was supposed to be a bounce back. That's what the doctors told him. It wasn't. And because of that and the lack of communication and the fear that he was experiencing, things snowballed. And yes, we ended up in 9 months, 6 figures in medical debt really quickly. Yeah. And it's really hard to overcome that when your entire business is created around one person's skill. and that person can't work, and that person's not, because of their pride, telling you what's happening. And we all do it. We all want to hide what's happening because,
Sure.
we're like, we're going to figure it out. And then nobody will know and it'll be better.
Yeah.
It wasn't better. And that's when I had angry clients and demands, and I was crumbling because I didn't know what to do, and my skill didn't work. So I had to recreate myself and realize this business has to be based on both of us. This business cannot be dependent on one person. And that's how I ended up in business coaching, because I couldn't let any other business find themselves in the same situation I was. Yeah. Where I was so vulnerable to one little thing that snowballed and trickled out to almost a failed marriage, almost, bankruptcy, and almost losing everything. Only thing that saved me is, my husband switched, and he just started taking ownership, started being honest with me, started working with me, and we figured it out together. We have an amazing relationship now. I did pay off my debt just before the pandemic, so I was prepared and ready. And I remember when people are like, oh my God, this is so hard. I'm like, hard is when you do it by yourself.
Yeah.
Nobody's there to support you. Yeah. And everybody's just like, oh, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. And you're like, but I'm drowning. And I was prepared. I'm now prepared for any situation. Financially, mentally, I can pivot fast. Yeah. Those are the skills I learned through my personal tragedy. Yeah. And I will never give those skills back, because they will be so valuable for my entire life, because those things happen. Yeah. And they will happen. Like, I remember, no way would anything ever happen. We're young. This, you had that idea, we're 30. What would happen? Yeah. Oh, a lot can happen. But yeah, right now I'm in the perfect place in my life. And it does happen. It did happen because of a car accident. It took 10 seconds to happen. Yeah. Because somebody ran a red light and smashed into my husband. Yeah. Well, he's still working on his own story, and he's still healing that. But for me, it was the greatest gift that I could have gave myself. Yeah.
Well, and you've got the thing that I think is just the perfect offering. I call it the "I created it because I needed it" offering, right? So,
yes, I did.
You have Rebrand You. Yes. So you can support people who are going through something like what you went through, who maybe don't know their voice yet, who, haven't fully stepped into their confidence and clarity and everything. And I think that's just, those are my favorite offers, because, there's a market, right?
Yes, exactly. And, and it's one of those things I was noticing before. When people would walk into my office and they wanted marketing. And there are a few times where I turn them away. I'm like, you're not ready for marketing. You need to figure these things out first. Yeah. Don't hire anybody for marketing, because you're going to throw that money away. Yeah. And I started seeing it over and over and over again. And I'm like, there has to be a better way to help businesses. And getting to the point where marketing is actually a tool that is effective. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I went into when all this happened, it gave me that opportunity to move into business coaching, because it's something I had already seen, but I never gave myself permission to do. Yeah.
Well, tell me if I remember this right, Amy, but I and maybe I'm flattering myself. Correct me. Please feel free to correct me. But when you did the Speak Like a Leader experience that first time, I have a recollection of you basically saying that you found your voice, and one of the first things you did is tell me that you wanted to work with me.
Yes, because in my business, people would approach me, right? Like they find me, they want to work with me. But in this situation, I was so drawn to, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to ask. Yeah. I'm going to ask for the job, the relationship, this is what I can offer, and this is what I'm willing to do. Yeah. Well, and I'm so glad you did. And you came in and
you had experienced the Speak Like a Leader, cohort-based version of the course. And then you sat me down and said, okay, look, this is where there's a hole. This is where there's a hole. Let's fix this. You need to do that. Write up some articles about this and this and this. And we worked on that for actually quite a while. And I feel like you took that course from a pretty good course to just, I think it's one of the best courses on the planet now that we did that.
I'm pretty proud of it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I seen the potential and I was like, you know what, here's my skill set. This is where I can help.
Yeah. Well, and what I loved about it is that you had so clearly taken it on yourself and you'd so clearly gotten so much out of it yourself. And then you had that outside the frame, right? It's hard to see the picture when you're inside the frame, and there you were outside the frame, and you just locked down all the things that needed to be locked down.
Exactly, to the point where we are just now co-host the program, and I love every minute of co-hosting that. And because of that, I actually now analyze other people's programs. And I use the same skills I learned from Speak Like a Leader experience to help people do their videos, for their pitching, for their program development, for what do they need to tell in the story. And what I notice is if we aren't really thinking about it, we switch. We'll switch on a story in our programs where we're telling the person, then we go into marketing talk. I'm like, wait a minute, this is the participant. And we forget our audience. Yeah. And then our language changes. And so now I find myself helping people create their programs, analyzing it to make it stronger so it's more consistent. I've helped clients analyze and interview their clients to find out what their stories are, who they are, and how people are perceiving their business. So I use all of these techniques I've learned to help businesses thrive in multiple different ways, but it all comes down to the story. Yeah. What are we telling our audience? Who are we attracting? And how do we explain our services? Yeah. Now, who do we need to thank as kind of the focal point of our original meet? That was the pumpkin plan. I was a certified pumpkin plan strategist at the time. And you had come on a call with one of our meet and greets. And I was like, okay, I will watch it. But the very first person was Steve Dale. Yeah. And something had changed. I'm talking to him like, what happened? What did you do? And he's like, I took this class with John Bates. I'm like, He just texted me this weekend to just say, hey, I was thinking about you. How you doing? Yeah. And so when he said that, and then you were on that call, I was like, okay, I'll listen to what John has to say. And I'm like, I'm in. Yeah. And I just totally jumped at it and didn't even think about it. And those are the best opportunities that lead me to the path I need, is when I know confidently I have to do this. Yeah. And sometimes it's not for the reasons I think it will be. Yeah, that's for sure. But there's always a reason. And I've learned through this whole process not to be ashamed or be like, oh, I didn't accomplish this, but what I did get is this. And that was the best nugget I could have done because it brought me here. Yeah. And it brought me along my path in a way that I'm very proud of. Yeah, I'm very proud of you. I think you should be very proud of you. I am. And that's something I couldn't have said 2-3 years ago. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Well, so another silver lining from the pandemic, huh? Exactly. There's always a silver lining everywhere, and the worst moments, and to the point, the courage that it takes just to live life. Yeah. And reach out and connect with people. Yeah. So, Amy, I noticed we're coming up on our time here. Is there anything I didn't ask, or is there anything you just like to say before we go? No, it's been an honor to be, to have you in my life and to help me with my journey as I figure things out, as I became into my own, developed the Rebrand You. Yeah. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and having you as my cheerleader, cheering me on, and just being able to connect with people is amazing. And your network is amazing. And the people who are in it are the loveliest people.
Boy, I feel like that is true, and I'm so lucky. And thanks for that, Amy. It means a lot to me, all of that. And I accept that compliment, and I also do hope you know how much I appreciate what you have brought me to, and just clarifying my offering and making that course just, better and better and better. And it is a blast to co-lead that with you. It's fun to be able to look at each other on a call when somebody has a big breakthrough, and, I see your face on Zoom and you see my face on Zoom, and it reminds us of all the other people that have had breakthroughs. And it's just such a great thing.
It is. It really is. And it's like the best moment ever. Yeah. And I want to keep doing that. And that's why I created rebrandyoucoaching.com for people to find me, if they want to help with their story. But it's more about the clarity of who they are, where do you start?
Yeah.
And I always said, that idea of what is your origin story? What is that moment? And some people are at a big one like I did, right? And sometimes it's not that big.
Yeah. An intimate epic is what I call it. That thing that happened maybe just between their ears, but it was such a big insight, right?
And a lot of times, like you said, we're in the picture, so we can't see it. So having a conversation really does make a difference. And it's just like when I was in your course and I'm talking to one of my action partner who is a man from Colombia that's in his 20s.
Supermodel,
gorgeous man, And I was like, what am I going to talk to this guy about that he would find interesting? I was really doubting my story at that time, and I said something like, oh, I'm a farm kid and grew up on a dairy farm, and he's like, wait, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
You don't want to know about dairy farming. That's we deal with poop and cows and, it's not that exciting. And he's like, no, I want to know more.
Yeah.
And it was his excitement over that simple idea of who I was and that person I tried to shove away and say, I'm not a dairy farmer. I didn't grow up that way. I didn't identify with it even then.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, no, that is who I am. That's how I grew up. That's who made me who I am today.
Yeah.
And it allowed me to heal that bridge of that shame that I had of being a farm kid.
Yeah. It's such a huge thing because, it's easy to see the picture when you're outside the frame, right? You've got that whole farm girl, just get her done. It's got to happen. You can't not milk the cows. I don't care, right? Get up early because this is just how it goes, and, plow through and all that. And there's a lot of strength that you have because of that. And that strength is less available when you're trying to deny it, right? I shove that away. I don't want to talk about that. That's not really me. No, actually, that is you. And there's this beautiful aspect to it. And when you just accept it and embrace it, then it just something else just becomes possible, right?
Exactly. It's why deny a piece of us? And that's what I've learned throughout this whole process. And I've watched every one of our participants do the same thing. They deny a piece.
Yeah.
And it's like, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
And that's
so
the power of a conversation. And they're like, you want to know more about that? I'm like, yes, I do.
Yeah.
And that healing, and it just comes full circle, that healing and bringing all that parts of elements of who you are and that communication. And it's really about talking it through.
Yeah.
It is hard to do it yourself.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I would have ever got to this point without having a verbal communication throughout the whole process.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think I can promise everyone a super hot 20-year-old Colombian supermodel dude.
Super action partner.
but here's what I can promise. It's always the perfect person, right? It's always the perfect. And that's exactly what you needed.
Yep. I needed to be uncomfortable with my stories and realize that somebody completely different than me was interested.
Yeah. Yep. Well, listen,
yeah.
that right there, I think, is a great note for us to leave it on, because that is an enormous thing to really get, I think, right? Like, someone other than you would find you interesting. And guess what? That's everybody else. So, so
Exactly.
So thanks for sharing your story, and thanks for what it makes available, and thanks for creating Rebrand You and reaching your hand out to help others gain their clarity, their confidence, and then their courage, or their courage and confidence. Yeah. Because it makes such a big difference.
It does. And it makes life just manageable. And knowing that you can handle whatever comes your way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on the show today, John.
Well, Amy, thank you for joining me. Oh, you're super welcome. It's a pleasure. It's nice to catch up, and it's really great to have you listening. Thank you for joining us, and I will hear you next time. Thanks, Amy Nubson of Rebrand. Now, by the way, it's rebrandyou.coach.
It's rebrandyoucoaching.com.
Rebrandyoucoaching.com. And we'll put all that in the show notes. We'll put up your social media links too. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening to us today and joining us. And I will hear you next time on speaklikealeader.show. Thank you for joining the Speak Like a Leader podcast. Go be awesome.